This is Pastor Lutzer of Running to Win, heard daily on Bible School Radio, 91.3 KDKR, Decatur, Dallas, Fort Worth, and on 91.3 KYJC, Commerce.
Portions of KDKR programming do not necessarily reflect the views of this station, its management, or staff.
Prudent Money with Bob Brooks is sponsored by the Prudent Money Foundation on 91.3.
Well, so what does 2024 look like for your retirement investments? Today we're going to take a look. Stay tuned for Prudent Money. Good afternoon and welcome to the Prudent Money Radio Show. I'm your host, Bob Brooks. Thank you so much for joining me today. You know I do appreciate it. So Happy New Year, everybody. Welcome back. It's great to be back in the saddle, even though I did love my vacation. I did love taking days off. I don't do enough of that during the year, I admit it. And but I just enjoyed spending the time with my family, getting a few things done, and beyond that, virtually not a whole lot of creation of value. I just didn't do a whole lot, which was great. I get kind of caught up on my rest, which is good as we look forward to 2024. And you know, as we talked about before break last year, how about that one? The one way that I would look at New Year's, and I always talk about this every New Year's that I've been on the radio, is that it's all about closing the door on 2023 and opening up the door to the expectation of new opportunities, God's blessings, and really preparing yourself for that. Now, you may look back in 2023 and think to yourself, well, I didn't really have a very good year. In fact, it was a horrible year. This happened, this happened, this happened. Well, you have an opportunity to either sit and dwell on what didn't go right or really pray for lessons, pray for what you were supposed to learn from it. Because when it comes right down to it, it comes down to habits. And I really do believe this. I mean, resolutions are fun to talk about, and I don't think people take that as quite as serious. You know, I'm going to do this, I'm going to do that, and then they forget about it within 2 or 3 weeks. It's kind of it's the intention of doing something different, the intention of creating growth in your life. But at the end of the day, it's a resolution. So I give that very little bit of power. Then we jump to goals, and a goal can be a huge target that we can focus on, that we can do the things we need to do. The problem is that the chances are you're carrying into a new year and into a new set of goals the habits that prevented you from reaching goals maybe in 2023. Doing the same thing over and over and over and getting the same result is absolutely crazy. There's some kind of a quote in there. I can't remember who said that originally, and they said a lot. They used or said it a lot more eloquently than I did, but you get the idea. And you've got to correct those habits and develop new habits. That's what I would encourage you to focus on, because when you change your habits and develop new habits along the way, you're a lot more likely to achieve your goals, because you're not going to achieve your goals doing the same things that don't work over and over and over again. It's all about habits. I'm a real big believer in that. And don't, one of the things I would caution you about, don't put down 10 habits you want to change all at once. Just put maybe 10, 15 down and say, these are the habits I want to focus on in the new year. Really focus on one at a time, or maybe a couple at a time, because I find that when people, they get too overly ambitious about goals and New Year's resolutions, and then they fail to do it, and it's a long road. It's not going to go perfect just because you set the goals, and you're not guaranteed to get them just because you set them. So you really got to work at it and make sure that you're doing the things that put you in the ballpark of actually achieving those goals. So that's one of the things I would really urge you to pray about and consider today. What can I do differently in 2024? Don't waste this opportunity. Once again, the symbolism of closing the door on a year that maybe wasn't so great, or maybe was a great year, and expanding on that. Expanding on a bad year, coming through it, expanding on a good year, making it an even better year. And that's exactly, though, what I would want you to focus on. And we're going to hopefully bring you tools and information that can help you do that. So always appreciate you listening to Prudent Money. If you have a question for me, please go to the website at www.prudentmoney.com. And at the website, you'll find two different ways to get information. The first one is just send an email in. I'll answer it. Most of the time, that takes care of it. But then there's the questions that require a little bit more in-depth information and me asking questions. And so I've set a schedule, and each week we set up times that you can grab one. You may have to go a couple weeks in advance, but you can grab a time, and that way you can schedule a phone call with me, and we can answer your questions. There's absolutely no cost, no charge, no obligation to doing it. It's just my way of bringing you resources that I think that you need. And that's all at the website. For more information, just go to prudentmoney.com. Well, it's also that time of year where everybody has a forecast. And a couple things I want to stress, actually three things. First one is no one has a crystal ball. Now, I know that's no big shocker. Everybody's got an opinion, and everybody's got an agenda. So since we don't have a crystal ball, all we do have is an opinion. Now, there are these forecasters or prophets or whatever you want to call them, make it as if what they predict always comes true, and that theirs is more powerful than an opinion. Be that it may, I still think it comes down to everybody's got an opinion. Time will tell who is right and who is wrong. So always be careful about what I call the gloom and doomers. Not that they don't, maybe they don't have maybe they do have a point, but there are a lot of times trying to sell subscriptions to email letters and books and magazines. I mean, you name it. They're trying to make money, and they do that on the backs of fear. Fear tends to create action by people, and they will go and buy things and spend their money with you. So make sure that you're kind of keeping that into perspective, because as we'll talk about, investing is an emotional process. It's an irrational process. It can be if you're not careful. So the bottom line is, what do you do to get ready for the growth of your retirement in a brand new year, knowing that realistically, even though we'd love to think that someone's figured out a way to get things done, figured out a way to predict, to make decisions, it's just not there. You know, I've always said that if there was a holy grail, if there was a set of principles that worked 100% of the time, I wouldn't tell anybody. I would just use it for myself. I think that's so the fact that people are giving away their quote-unquote secrets doesn't make sense. It doesn't make sense either. But here's where it comes down to. This, and we talk about this a lot, but I think it's really important to look at this time of year and get yourself set up and ready to roll. Set up your portfolio to handle the risk that you want to take, and determine ahead of time when you're going to do a thorough evaluation of your portfolio and the risks that you're taking, and if you think it's still okay. Now, that particular aspect of it could be, I wouldn't do it once a month. I would do it at the least once a quarter, maybe 4 times a year or 3 times a year or 2 times a year, and just and go through a very uh, thorough analysis of what you're doing, and is it lining up with your risk level? And if I really do believe, and that it comes down to making sure that you are comfortable with your risk level, because with risk comes reward, with risk comes loss. How are you going to handle either? And what kind of reward are you looking for? What kind of loss are you attempting to avoid or protect yourself against while trying to get that growth? And if I said to you, the way that your portfolio is set up, and this is assuming that it's not professionally managed, that it's just a buy and hold with the way that you allocate it towards stocks and allocate it towards bonds. If I was to say, well, it looks like you need to be able to handle somewhere between a 20 to 25% decline in your portfolio at some point, and is that something that you can deal with? That's why I always want to know, how did an investment that I'm thinking about using or I am using perform, or how do they perform in the tough times? How far down did they go in loss? How long did it take for them to move back up? And then it comes down to, if you break, in the vast majority of 401ks are broken down into stocks and into bonds, into money markets. Remember, money markets are making roughly 5% right now. And you look at that and you say, well, how much risk do I want to take? How much stock risk do I want to take? And unfortunately, bonds have had the same level of risk in them as well. So you got to consider that as far as risk goes. Not a very easy year for trying to allocate portfolios. This is Bob Brooks. We're up against a break. Stick around and I'll be right back.
The Word for Today is excited to announce the new official online home for the ministry of Pastor Chuck Smith and Kay Smith, pastorchuck.org. At pastorchuck.org, you'll have instant access to thousands of hours of verse-by-verse teaching by Pastor Chuck Smith from Genesis through Revelation, and full access to special messages on subjects such as prophecy and much, much more. Also at pastorchuck.org, a full library of great teachings by Kay Smith, and a section where you can read some of Pastor Chuck's books online, all free of charge. So visit the new official online home of the Word for Today and the ministry of Pastor Chuck and Kay Smith, pastorchuck.org.
Spiritual warfare is real, and it's dangerous. But this week on A New Beginning, Pastor Greg Laurie reacquaints us with the protective armor the Lord has given us to fight victoriously. Tune in for the launch of our series of most requested messages of the year. Insight on spiritual warfare, this week on A New Beginning.
A New Beginning, weekday mornings at 7:30, here on KDKR.
Hi, I'm Jill Taylor, inviting you to join me each Saturday morning at 11 o'clock for Choose Life Radio. You'll hear people from across America sharing their stories of faith, forgiveness, redemption, and restoration. Choose Life Radio will encourage you to fully appreciate the gift of life. You may also find help for you or a friend in need. So please join me Saturday mornings at 11 o'clock right here on Bible School Radio 91.3.
Welcome back. This is Bob Brooks, and you are listening to the Prudent Money Radio Show. Thank you so much for joining me today. You know I do appreciate it. We're talking about the brand new year, 2024. What does that have in line with your portfolio, with your investments? And most importantly, all that affects, of course, your retirement. Sometimes I think we forget that. I was talking about understanding the risks that you're taking, be comfortable with it, since we don't have a crystal ball, since we can't determine exactly what's going to happen. I would look at, my personal opinion is that I think we're in a time to be more defensive and kind of have those plan B in the works to a degree. Every year. Oh, actually, before I get to that, let me talk about this. We're talking about the risk. If you have a financial advisor, bring him or her into that conversation. Have discussions as to what you want to accomplish in the next year. Make sure that if you want to do X percent, if you'd like to see your portfolio grow X percent or a minimum of X percent, tell your advisor that. And of course, they're going to tell you, well, I can't predict that, but you can make some moves that could potentially get you there, and managing that along the way. But have the conversation with, how much risk am I taking? What is the probability of loss given the worst case scenario and given the best case scenario? I said this a second ago, is that if you can't absorb a 25% hit, and that's what your investments have done during tough periods, then I would rethink how I was invested. Obviously, you can't. I think one of the things that people try to do is they want to make some steps they think they can cut risk out or dramatically reduce risk. You're always going to have risk, and you can't predict what's going to happen. The problem is we need stocks, we need equities to grow a portfolio. I mean, it's just something that's part of it. I think all we can do is, I want to say the word prayerfully do, and make sure that we're seeking these answers through prayer and in conversation with God, and which is something else we always tend to forget. And make sure that we are at peace, which only God can give, that sense of peace of making the right decisions. So every January, I schedule a workshop or a webinar. Actually, webinars we've been doing that lately. And we'll be doing one here in a couple of weeks. I'm still kind of putting everything together, and I'll be rolling out the information on there. I think it's not too difficult to hop on a webinar and hear some information that I think will help you out as we kind of prepare about this whole thing about risk. So be listening for that. But at the beginning of most workshops, I will put together a list of what I think spells risk for the markets. And if I had to do that today, some of the ones that I'm looking at that would make that final list are inflation pressures. Although I don't think inflation could surpass the height that it's been, I do believe that it can come back up close into around there again with the price of oil going up. Now, this is what is just really has me baffled. It just really does have me baffled. And that is why we're sitting at $70 a barrel of oil. With all the geopolitical problems going on, with everything happening, the price of oil should be way higher. But I think it simply comes down to this. In fact, let me back up. Here is what's going on in the Red Sea that oil prices should be going crazy. And it says oil prices volatile as an Iranian warship enters Red Sea after the U.S. destroys, and I don't know how to pronounce it, Houthi boats. I would think that, and I went and checked out the price of oil, thinking, well, that's probably going way up, and it was down negative 1.4%. It's there's measures that the government can take, and I think it's got consequences for doing so, but they can manipulate the price of oil. And I know of a couple stories where they've done that in the past that I know of, and I believe they were doing it again to keep the price of oil down, to keep the price of gasoline down, because it makes no sense whatsoever. But another one that could make it on the list is a geopolitical. Of course, we've got wars going on, and then of course the presidential elections. Can you imagine? That is a 2024 event. 11 11 months or a little over 11 months away, we're going to be voting on somebody. I don't think that you can sit there and confidently say that both Trump and Biden will be running. Who knows? I do believe, though, we will be saying this time in a year, this time in a little bit over 11 months, I think we'll be saying, wow, didn't see that coming. And, it's interesting, back in 2020, we were doing live workshops then, and I was putting together my list. I just happened at the very end, the day before, I put pandemic, because I had been reading more and more and more about a pandemic. Little did we know that it's not only was only the risk of the year, it was also the one that drastically changed the country that we know of. Of course, recession is being predicted all over the place for 2024, and you got to remember that there is something that will have to cause a recession that we're not going to see coming. I mean, that's definitely a thing to keep in mind. Unemployment or employment, we'll get the jobs numbers here coming up on Friday. The way that they're talking about them, it's almost as if it's taken a big hit. So who knows? Then of course there's cycles. So I won't get into that right now. And the bond market is also something that carries a huge amount of risk. I think that's, if I had to circle one thing, I would say keep an eye on the bond market. Remember, bonds represent debt, and we really haven't gone through a situation where we've had any kind of a crisis or problem in the bond market. So just keep an eye on it. So realinvestmentadvice.com is a site that I go to quite a bit. I love the writing on the site. And they had some information here that I wanted to share with you. And I doubt we'll get through all of it. In fact, I know we won't. And I will continue this conversation on Thursday. I do believe we have John Apollo coming in tomorrow. So we'll start off with what are some of the things that Wall Street looks at. And I'm always amazed that of course, Pop Culture Finance just jumps all over this just from the standpoint of, if this happens, this is definitely going to happen. Let's read through it and let's talk about it. It says there is an abundance of Wall Street axioms surrounding the first month of the new year as investors try to predict what is in store for the next 12 months. Once again, can't predict, only have an opinion. There's a Super Bowl indicator. They look at the first 5 market days of the year. Of course, today not starting off too hot. And they say, so goes the first 5 days, so goes the month, and then so goes the month, so goes the year. According to Stock Traders Almanac, the direction of January's trading, gain or loss for the month, has predicted the course of the rest of the year 75% of the time. 75% of the time, whatever has happened in January has influenced the entire year. Now, I want you to think about that for a second. Let's go back to my example of hurricanes. The most deadly hurricane is a Category 5 hurricane. And that's something that can wipe out an entire city without question, rebuilding for years upon years. So you could statistically, you could look at it and say 75% of the bear markets, of the hurricanes that hit the Florida coast are nothing more than kind of a setback for a couple of weeks. They get everything cleaned up, everything turns back to normal, or even then maybe it's a couple of months. But it's never the devastation of a Cat 5. But if you look at it, a certain percent of the hurricanes over a certain period of time are mild hurricanes, maybe 1 through 3, 3 not always being a mild, but being something you can come back from. And then there's the life-changing ones of the Category 4 and Category 5. Same thing happens with the stock market. Yeah, sure, that statistic says 75% of the time January is positive, the whole year is positive, but it's that other 25% that can be absolutely destructive to a portfolio, absolutely destructive. So you can't just go, well, 75% of the time I guess I'm in pretty good shape. It didn't work. I don't think it works quite that easily. I mean, you got to look out for that other 25% can be really massive in destruction. So I would look at it that way versus looking at it from the standpoint of, well, this supports the buy and hold forever type approach that 75% of the time will be okay, but it's what happens in that 25% that is really tough. We're going to talk a lot more about this on Thursday. Like I said, John Apollo's in tomorrow. And if you got a question for me, please go to the website, prudentmoney.com, and send it in because we are all out of time. Till we do meet again next time, keep the faith and have a great rest of the day.
That's all the time we have for today. Questions or comments for Bob, or to find out more great information like what you've just heard, visit www.prudentmoney.com. Be sure to join Bob Brooks again for the next edition of Prudent Money.